High above the endless, glittering expanse of the Pacific Ocean, in the brutal summer of 1943, an elite Japanese fighter pilot is patrolling the skies. He is sitting in the cockpit of the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, the most terrifyingly agile, beautifully engineered dogfighter on the face of the Earth. For the first 2 years of the war, the Zero had reigned supreme. It was a phantom, an aerodynamic blade that could turn inside any American fighter, outclimb them, and shoot them out of the sky before the American pilots even realized they were in a dogfight. The Japanese pilot is highly trained, fiercely confident, and utterly convinced of his absolute superiority. Suddenly, he spots a silhouette in the distance. As the aircraft approaches, the Japanese pilot is almost confused. The American plane flying toward him is not sleek, it is not graceful. It is an obscenely massive, barrel-chested monstrosity that looks less like a fighter plane and more like a flying milk jug. It is so incredibly huge that the Japanese pilot assumes it must be a slow, heavily laden bomber. He banks his nimble Zero, sliding effortlessly onto the tail of the massive American plane, perfectly lining up his gun sight. He pulls the trigger, sending a lethal stream of 7.7mm and 20mm cannon shells directly into the fuselage of the American aircraft. He expects the plane to instantly erupt into a ball of fire, just like every other enemy he has ever fought. But the American plane does not explode. It does not even smoke. The bullets simply bounce off its heavy steel armor, plating like pebbles thrown against a bank vault. Before the Japanese pilot can process this impossible reality, the massive American aircraft violently flips over and plunges toward the Earth in a vertical dive, accelerating to a speed so blindingly fast that the lightweight Zero physically cannot follow it without ripping its own wings off. The American plane screams down, pulls up in a massive, terrifying arc, and comes up directly underneath the fragile Japanese fighter. The American pilot presses the trigger, and 8 heavy .50 caliber machine guns absolutely vaporize the Zero in a single deafening fraction of a second. The undisputed king of the Pacific skies had just been utterly slaughtered by a flying tank. If you want to know the raw, unfiltered truth about the absolute monsters of military engineering that won the Second World War, do not watch another second without hitting that subscribe button. We put you directly into the cockpit and break down the violent reality of aerial combat that the textbooks always gloss over. Type the word juggernaut in the comments right now if you are ready to explore the terrifying power of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. To fully comprehend the sheer, uncompromising violence of the P-47 Thunderbolt, you have to understand the terrifying situation the United States military was facing in the Pacific theater. In the early days of the war, the Japanese Zero was slaughtering American pilots. The Zero was built on a philosophy of extreme, unadulterated agility. To make the plane as light and maneuverable as possible, Japanese engineers stripped away absolutely everything that was not strictly necessary for flight. They removed the heavy steel armor plating that protected the pilot. They did not install self-sealing fuel tanks. They sacrificed survivability for pure acrobatic dominance. In a twisting, turning, slow-speed dogfight, the Zero was an untouchable samurai sword. The American military quickly realized that trying to build a plane to outturn the Zero was a fatal mistake. You cannot beat a master swordsman in a knife fight. Instead, the American engineers decided they were not going to bring a knife to the fight at all. They were going to bring a massive, indestructible sledgehammer. Enter Alexander Kartveli, a brilliant, eccentric aircraft designer working for the Republic Aviation Corporation. When the United States Army Air Forces asked for a new fighter, Kartveli did not look at aerodynamics first. He looked at pure, raw power. He started with the engine. He chose the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. This was not a standard aircraft engine. It was a monstrous 18-cylinder, 2,000 horsepower mechanical beast that was originally designed to power massive transport planes and bombers. It was so impossibly large that Kartveli literally had to design the entire airplane simply to wrap around this singular, colossal power plant. But a massive engine needs a massive amount of air to function at high altitudes. So, Kartveli took a gigantic turbo supercharger and stuffed it deep into the belly of the aircraft, running complex ductwork all the way from the nose to the tail. This intricate plumbing gave the fuselage its famous barrel-like shape, earning it the affectionate, highly respected nickname among its pilots, the Jug. When a fully loaded P-47 rolled off the assembly line and sat on the runway, it weighed an astonishing 7 tons. It was the largest, heaviest, single-engine fighter plane ever built in the history of warfare. It was twice as heavy as the Japanese Zero. When British and Soviet pilots first saw the Thunderbolt, they openly laughed at it, claiming that an aircraft that heavy could not possibly fight in the air, but could only be used to crash through buildings. They stopped laughing the exact second the P-47 opened fire. The offensive capability of the Thunderbolt was a masterpiece of American industrial excess. Cartveli did not give the plane 2 machine guns, or 4, or 6. He embedded 8 massive Browning M2, 50 caliber heavy machine guns directly into the massive wings. When a P-47 pilot pulled the trigger, the recoil was so incredibly violent that it could actually stall the aircraft if flying at a low speed. These 8 guns unleashed an apocalyptic wall of lead, firing over 100 rounds of armor-piercing incendiary ammunition every single second. A pilot did not have to meticulously aim for vital engine components or fuel lines. If a P-47 simply swept its crosshairs across an enemy fighter, the sheer kinetic impact of those heavy .50 caliber rounds would literally act like a massive airborne chainsaw, violently sawing the enemy aircraft completely in half. When the P-47 Thunderbolt finally arrived in the Pacific, the veteran Japanese pilots looked at its massive, bulky silhouette and assumed it would be easy prey. They attempted to engage the Americans in traditional twisting dogfights. But the American pilots, led by brilliant tactical minds like Colonel Neil Kirby of the 348th Fighter Group, refused to play by the Japanese rules. They instituted a terrifying new tactic known as boom and zoom. Because the P-47 possessed a massive supercharger, it could fly comfortably at 30,000 feet, way above the effective fighting altitude of the Zero. The American pilots would spot the Japanese formations below them, roll their massive 7-ton aircraft over, and enter a steep, terrifying dive. This is where the obscene weight of the P-47 became its greatest weapon. Gravity is a brutal master. A light airplane cannot dive fast, but a 7-ton block of metal drops like a meteor. In a vertical dive, the P-47 could reach speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. It would plunge out of the sun, moving so incredibly fast that the Japanese pilots did not even have time to react. The Thunderbolt would rip through the Japanese formation, unleash a 3-second burst from its 8 heavy machine guns, instantly vaporizing whatever it hit, and then use that massive momentum to violently zoom back up to 30,000 feet, completely untouchable. The Japanese Zero pilots were suddenly trapped in an absolute nightmare. Their greatest advantage, their legendary agility, was completely instantly neutralized. It did not matter how tightly you could turn if the enemy never tried to turn with you. The Americans were fighting an energy war, using the massive weight of the Jug to dictate exactly when, where, and how the fight would happen. And if a Japanese pilot managed to pull off a miracle and actually get behind a P-47, the reality was even more demoralizing. The Thunderbolt was practically indestructible. It was heavily armored, featuring a thick steel plate behind the pilot's head and self-sealing fuel tanks that absorbed incendiary rounds without catching fire. The massive radial engine in the front acted as a brutal steel shield. Japanese bullets would embed themselves in the massive cylinders, and the Pratt & Whitney engine would simply keep running. There are heavily documented, verifiable accounts of American P-47 pilots flying back to base with entire cylinders blown off their engines, their wings riddled with hundreds of cannon holes, and massive sections of their tail completely ripped away by enemy fire. The plane refused to die. The psychological toll this took on the Japanese pilots was catastrophic. They were flying planes made of lightweight duralumin that would erupt into a fatal fireball from a single American tracer round, while they were dumping hundreds of rounds into the Americans with absolutely no effect. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the brutal, uncompromising manifestation of American industrial might. It was not built to be pretty. It was not built to perform elegant aerobatics for the crowds at an air show. It was built to absorb massive amounts of punishment, protect the 19-year-old kid sitting in the cockpit, and deliver an overwhelming, apocalyptic level of violence upon the enemy. The Thunderbolt completely shattered the myth of Japanese aerial invincibility. It proved that in the brutal, unforgiving mathematics of total war, extreme survivability, and overwhelming firepower will always crush delicate agility. The P-47 brought tens of thousands of American boys home safely, absorbing battle damage that would have disintegrated any other aircraft in the sky. If this deep dive into the absolute brute force of the P-47 Thunderbolt changed the way you look at military aviation, you need to hit the like button right now to honor the indestructible machines of the past and the fearless men who flew them. Share this video with anyone who loves military history and the unfiltered truth behind the legends. Make sure you subscribe and turn your notifications all the way on so you never miss our heavy-hitting breakdowns of the machines that forged the modern world. I want to hear from you in the comments below. In a life-or-death aerial battle, would you rather rely on the extreme, untouchable agility of the Japanese Zero or the massive, indestructible armor and heavy firepower of the P-47 Thunderbolt? I read every single comment, and I will see you in the next one.